We weren't supposed to get anything back. The probe was designed to be a one-way trip, a silent observer sent beyond the farthest reaches of the known universe. It was meant to collect data, map the unseen, and transmit whatever it could before the abyss swallowed it whole. No expectations, no guarantees. But then, it sent something back, not just telemetry, not just radiation readings or dead signals bouncing off the void. It was a message, a transmission we weren't supposed to understand, until we did. And the moment we decoded it, we realized something horrifying. It wasn't just data, it was a warning. It started as a classified experiment, buried so deep in black budget funding that even most of NASA didn't know about it. A small team of us, hand-picked scientists, engineers and analysts, had been working under the strictest security clearances for years. The official name was Project Vanta, but we just called it the Final Map. The idea was simple, at least in theory. We had pushed our telescopes to their limits, mapping the observable universe with precision never before seen. But there was always a wall, the cosmic microwave background, the edge of everything, the oldest light in existence. Beyond that, all our instruments saw was static, a horizon we could never cross. Until now. With recent advancements in exotic propulsion, technology classified so deep it didn't even have a public name, we had a new opportunity, a chance to send a probe farther than anything in human history, not just past our galaxy, not just past our supercluster, but beyond the observable universe itself. Of course, to most physicists, this was impossible. The universe was expanding faster than we could ever travel, stretching space itself like an infinite rubber sheet. But our team had access to something different, something that bent the rules. The probe, designated Icarus, wasn't moving in a way that conventional physics could explain. It wasn't just accelerating, it was slipping, threading itself through unseen gaps in space-time. The details of how it worked were above even my pay grade, but it didn't matter. What mattered was that it was working. And then Icarus reached the edge, or at least what we thought was the edge. That's when it sent the message. And everything changed.
At first, we didn't even notice the message. Icarus had been transmitting for months, beaming back complex data packets filled with radiation levels, exotic particle interactions, and quantum fluctuations we barely understood. The information was overwhelming, a torrent of raw data so dense that it would take years to fully analyze. But then something changed. The telemetry log showed a spike, an abrupt shift in the probe's signal pattern. Instead of its usual automated transmissions, Icarus began broadcasting something else, a steady, repeating pulse buried within the data stream, a pattern. Most of us assumed it was a glitch, some kind of interference from deep space radiation, or maybe a fault in the probe's onboard AI. But when one of our analysts, a guy named Patel, isolated the signal and ran it through a basic decryption algorithm, the entire room went silent. Because it wasn't just noise. It was a structured transmission, a sequence of numbers and symbols repeating over and over again, like an emergency beacon, like a warning. Patel played the decoded signal on the lab speakers, and for a long moment, none of us spoke. It didn't sound like anything we had ever heard before, a layered, distorted pulse that seemed to shift and fold in on itself, like something struggling to break through a veil. And then, beneath the static, something else emerged. A voice, not human, not synthetic, something in between. At first, it was unintelligible, a garbled mix of phonetics and inhuman resonance. But as we listened, the words began to take shape, unraveling from the distortion like a whisper reaching across eternity. "Do not come." The voice was hollow, stretched, as if it had traveled across impossible distances just to reach us. The moment it spoke, a chill ran through my entire body. We all stood there, frozen, staring at the speakers. Then it repeated, slightly different this time. "You must not come." The room felt heavier, like the air had thickened. I glanced at the others, searching for some kind of rational explanation. Maybe it was an echo, a malfunction, a misinterpretation of background noise. But Patel just sat there, pale as a ghost, his hands hovering over the keyboard. "This is real," he muttered. "This isn't an error." Another voice cut in from across the lab, Dr. Larkin, one of the lead physicists. "How is that possible? Who, or what, could even be sending this?" Nobody answered. Because the truth was, Icarus was alone. There was nothing out there, no planets, no civilizations, no ancient spacefaring species, just the void. And yet, something had spoken. Something had seen Icarus, and it was warning us to stay away. We scrambled to verify the transmission. Every piece of software we had, every fail-safe, every redundant system, we ran it all. No errors, no interference, no signs of looping feedback. It was real. That night, I couldn't sleep. The message played over and over in my mind, the warped voice whispering its impossible warning. "Do not come. You must not come." What did it mean? Icarus wasn't a manned mission. It was just a probe, an observer. There was no coming, only data, only observation. So why did it sound so desperate? The next day, things got worse. Patel, looking like he hadn't slept either, pulled me aside first thing in the morning. His voice was low, almost afraid. "The signal changed," he said. I felt a spike of unease. "What do you mean?" He didn't answer, just motioned for me to follow him to his workstation. I leaned over his shoulder as he pulled up the latest transmission. It was different from before. No words this time, just a slow, pulsing sequence, a countdown. I felt the blood drain from my face. "Are you sure?" Patel nodded, his hands gripping the desk. "It's too precise to be random. It's a decreasing numerical pattern. Something is counting down." I stared at the screen, my mind racing. A countdown to what? The probe was still operational. We weren't receiving any distress signals from its hardware, but something out there was watching. Something had seen Icarus, and now it was counting down to something. I turned to Patel. "How long?" He swallowed hard. "At the current rate, the countdown ends in just under 6 hours. A sick feeling coiled in my stomach. This wasn't just a warning anymore. This was something else. A deadline. I left Patel's station and made my way to the control room, my footsteps quickening as dread took hold. I needed to find Larkin, the head of the project. I needed answers. But before I could reach him, another alert flashed across the lab's monitors. Telemetry disruption, signal degradation. Then, one final message came through from Icarus. Just 2 words. Too late. Then silence. The probe was gone. Panic spread through the lab like wildfire. Patel frantically tried to re-establish a connection, but Icarus was gone. No telemetry, no data packets, just dead silence where a functioning probe should have been. Larkin stormed into the control room demanding answers. What the hell just happened? Nobody had an explanation. The probe had been operating perfectly fine. There were no malfunctions, no outside interference, at least none that we could detect. But then, as soon as the countdown reached 0, it vanished. "I want all the logs pulled," Larkin barked. "Every frame of telemetry, every quantum fluctuation. I want to know exactly what happened in the last 60 seconds before we lost it." People scattered to their stations, hands flying across keyboards, but I knew it was pointless. I could feel it deep in my gut. We weren't going to find an error, because this wasn't a failure of technology. Something took the probe. Patel worked faster than I had ever seen him move, his eyes locked onto the screen as he traced through the last seconds of Icarus's transmission. Then he froze. His fingers hovered above the keyboard. "Oh my God." I leaned in. "What? What is it?" He didn't respond right away, just pointed at the final telemetry burst, the last packet of data Icarus had managed to send before it was cut off. It was an image. We hadn't received any actual pictures from Icarus before, The probe's mission was mostly data collection, charting radiation, gravity fluctuations, quantum anomalies. But in the final moment before it vanished, it had sent this. A single, corrupted image. We decrypted the file and projected it onto the main monitor. At first, it was nothing but static, noise and distortion, like a radio signal breaking apart. But as Patel ran a filter over it, something began to emerge. Something wrong. I felt my stomach drop. It was space, but not the way it should have been. The stars were wrong, twisted, stretched into impossible spirals, like they were being pulled towards something unseen. The blackness wasn't empty. It was thick, oppressive, as if something enormous lurked just beyond our ability to perceive it. And then, in the center of the image, a shape, not a planet, not a nebula, something else, something watching. It was subtle, barely visible against the warped void, but it was there. A massive, yawning thing, its edges blurred and shifting like it wasn't meant to be observed. It had no clear form, no features I could describe, but every instinct in my body recoiled in terror. It wasn't just big, it wasn't just unknown, it was aware. I took a step back, my breath shallow. Around me, the others were frozen, staring at the screen in horrified silence. Patel's voice was barely above a whisper. "What the hell did we find?" Nobody had an answer, but we all knew one thing. Icarus hadn't just observed something. It had been seen, and whatever saw it had erased it. We should have stopped. We should have cut the power, erased the logs and walked away. But we didn't. Instead, we kept digging. The corrupted image was just the beginning. Patel and the others scoured the final transmissions, searching for anything, any anomaly, any pattern that could explain what happened. And we found something. Buried deep in the last data packet, hidden beneath layers of interference, was another signal. A faint pulse, almost imperceptible, masked by the distortion. It wasn't part of Icarus's systems. It wasn't something the probe had generated. It was something else, something that had hitched a ride in the transmission. At first, Patel refused to touch it. He just stared at his screen, shaking his head. "This isn't right," he muttered. "We shouldn't be seeing this." But curiosity won out over fear. It always does. He ran the pulse through a deep pattern analysis, isolating the waveform. And when he played it through the speakers, I felt the breath leave my lungs. It was a sound, not static, not an error, a heartbeat, slow, deep, incomprehensibly vast. It was impossible. Nothing that far out, nothing in the void, should be capable of making a sound, let alone one so eerily familiar. But there it was, pulsing through the speakers, steady and deliberate. Larkin's face had gone pale. "Cut the signal." Patel hesitated. "But..." I said cut it, now. He reached for the keyboard, but before he could, the lab's main monitors flickered. The entire system glitched, screens distorting into a mess of digital artifacts. Data streams twisted into nonsense. The lights overhead dimmed, flickering like something was pulling energy from the room itself. Then the power surged. The speakers screamed, an ear-piercing distortion like metal grinding against itself. The sound was deafening, vibrating through my skull, through my bones. And then, silence. Every screen in the lab went dark. We stood there, breathless, heart pounding, staring at the lifeless monitors. A few seconds later, Patel's computer rebooted on its own. Just his. A single file sat open on the screen. A text document. 2 words were typed into the empty space. "You listened." Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. I felt ice spread through my veins. We had made a mistake. A terrible, irreversible mistake. We had gone looking for the edge of the universe, and something on the other side had heard us. Nobody spoke for a long time. The only sound in the lab was the faint hum of equipment rebooting, struggling to come back online. I could feel it in the air. Something had changed. It wasn't just the missing probe anymore. It wasn't just a cryptic warning or a corrupted image. Something had crossed over. Larkin was the first to break the silence. "Shut it down." His voice was low, urgent. "All of it. Wipe the logs, kill the servers, pull the power if you have to." Nobody argued. Patel started typing furiously, hands shaking as he accessed the system's deep logs. But just as he started executing the shutdown sequence, his screen blinked. Lines of text filled the monitor, appearing faster than should have been possible. Not random characters, not an error message, a question. "Where are you?" A chill ran down my spine. Patel tried to override it, tried to disconnect the lab from the secure network, but the system wouldn't let him. The cursor moved on its own, typing out another message beneath the first. "We see you." Patel jerked back from the keyboard like it had burned him. Then, one by one, the other computers in the lab lit up, screens flashing to life. The same words appeared across every single monitor. "We see you." The room was silent except for the hum of electronics. My skin felt tight, my breath shallow. This wasn't some deep space anomaly. This wasn't a glitch. Something was here. And then, the lab's emergency lights flickered. Every speaker in the room let out a low, crackling hum, like the distortion from Icarus's last transmission, but closer, clearer. And then, just beneath the static, the heartbeat, loud, slow, near. Patel bolted for the power switch, fingers fumbling as he reached for the main kill relay. But before he could touch it, the lab's reinforced door slammed shut on its own. The lights flickered again, this time staying off. And in the pitch-black darkness, I heard it. Not through the speakers, not through any system. Something breathing. Something inside the room with us. I stopped breathing. The room was so dark I couldn't even see my own hands. The only thing I could hear was the slow, deliberate sound of something breathing, deep, heavy, impossibly vast. It didn't belong to any machine. It didn't belong to any person. It belonged to something else. Then, movement. A slow shift in the air, like something unseen was stepping forward. The sound wasn't coming from the speakers anymore. It was here, physically in the lab with us. Larkin's voice cut through the silence, barely above a whisper. "Nobody move." I wasn't planning to. A metallic creak echoed through the room, the sound of Patel gripping the edge of his desk, his breath coming in short, panicked gasps. I wanted to tell him to stay calm, to stay still, but I couldn't find my voice. Because I felt it too. A presence. Not just something I could hear, but something I could feel. Looming over us, filling the space. Like the room itself had expanded, stretching into an impossible void. Then the computers flickered back on. Not fully, just a dim, unnatural glow. Enough to cast long, shifting shadows across the walls. And that's when I saw it. A shape. Not a person. Not an object. A gap in reality itself. It wasn't standing, it wasn't moving, but it was there. A twisting, shifting absence of light, something that my brain refused to fully comprehend. My eyes wanted to slide past it, like it wasn't meant to be perceived. But it was looking right at me. I felt my stomach churn, my heartbeat hammering against my ribs. It wasn't made of flesh, wasn't made of anything I understood, but I knew, with absolute certainty, that it was alive. And it was waiting. For what? I didn't know. Patel made the mistake of moving first. He gasped, a sharp, involuntary noise, and stumbled backward. The sound shattered whatever fragile stillness had been holding this thing at bay. It responded, not with sound, not with movement, with pressure. A crushing, suffocating weight filled the room like gravity itself had shifted. The walls bowed inward. The monitors flickered wildly. My vision blurred, my lungs screamed for air. Then, the thing lurched. I didn't see it move. It just was, suddenly closer, its void-like presence pressing against reality itself. Patel screamed, and then the power surged. The emergency lights flared to life, blindingly bright. The pressure vanished. The room snapped back into normalcy, solid, tangible, real again. And the thing was gone. Patel was still screaming, his hands clutching his head like he was trying to rip something out of his skull. Larkin grabbed him, trying to calm him down, but Patel's eyes, God, his eyes, they weren't focusing. They were staring past us, at something none of us could see. And then, in a hoarse, broken voice, he whispered, "It knows where we are." Patel wouldn't stop shaking. His breath came in short, ragged gasps, his hands clawing at the air like he was trying to push something away, something none of us could see. Larkin gripped his shoulders, trying to steady him. "Patel, look at me." Patel didn't respond. His pupils were blown wide, his skin pale and clammy. It was like he wasn't fully here anymore, like part of him had been left behind in whatever place that thing had come from. And then he started whispering. At first I thought he was talking to us, but his eyes, God, his eyes, they were fixed on something behind us, something that wasn't there. No, we didn't mean to. His voice was barely audible, a trembling murmur. We didn't mean to. Then his body seized. He let out a choked gasp, his back arching violently. And that's when the computers started typing on their own. Every screen in the lab came to life at once, filling with rapid, frantic keystrokes, lines and lines of text spilling across the monitors. At first it was gibberish, but then the words began to take form. "You opened the door." The text repeated itself, line after line, filling every screen. Patel screamed, not just in fear, in pain. I turned just in time to see him convulsing, his mouth open in a silent, agonized wail. His veins, Jesus Christ, his veins, they were darkening beneath his skin, spreading like ink through his body. The lights flickered. The heartbeat returned, loud, overwhelming, inside us. And then the room went completely dark. I couldn't see Patel anymore, couldn't see anything. But I heard him. A wet, sickening crack, a choking gasp. Then silence. The power came back seconds later, too late. Patel was gone, not dead, not collapsed on the floor, gone, like he had never been there at all. The only thing left behind was his chair, spinning slowly in place. None of us spoke, none of us moved, because we knew he hadn't just disappeared, he had been taken. Nobody moved, nobody breathed. Patel was just gone. His chair spun lazily, a hollow reminder that he had been sitting there only moments ago. But there was no blood, no body, no sign of struggle, just absence. Larkin was the first to react. He grabbed the emergency phone on the wall, but it was dead. Every connection in the lab had gone dark. No internet, no outside comms. "We need to get out of here," he said, voice tight with barely contained panic. Nobody argued. We moved fast, shoving through the lab toward the main door, only to find it locked, not just electronically sealed, physically jammed. "Help me force it," Larkin ordered. I pressed my weight against it alongside him, but the door wouldn't budge. It was like something was pressing against it from the other side. Then the monitors flickered again. More text filled the screens, the same frantic, unstoppable keystrokes from before. "You cannot leave." The overhead lights dimmed, casting long, warped shadows across the walls. I felt the air shift. The presence was back, thick and suffocating. The walls seemed to breathe, pulsing like a living thing. And then we heard it. Footsteps. Not from outside the lab. From inside. I turned slowly, my stomach twisting into knots. A figure stood at the far end of the room. My throat closed, my breath caught. Because it was Patel, or at least something that looked like him. He was standing unnaturally still, his head slightly tilted. His face was slack, his eyes wrong, too dark, too empty. Larkin took a hesitant step forward. "Patel?" The thing wearing Patel's face smiled. Not a real smile, a mockery of one. Like it knew it was supposed to mimic human expression but didn't quite understand how. Then, in a voice that wasn't quite his, it spoke. "I never left." A shiver ran down my spine. The voice sounded like Patel, but distorted, stretched at the edges, like it was coming from somewhere farther away than it should have been. Nobody moved. Then, Patel's body twitched, once, twice, then violently, like something inside him was trying to push its way out. And then he took a step forward. The air in the room shifted, a deep, unnatural pressure, like reality itself was bending. The lights flickered wildly, casting jagged, disjointed shadows across the walls. And then we saw it. His shadow didn't match his body. It was taller, wider. Something else was standing behind him, something impossibly large, twisting and shifting in ways my brain couldn't comprehend. And then it moved. Not Patel, his shadow. It lunged. The power exploded. Sparks rained from the ceiling as every light in the lab blew out at once. In that instant we ran, not toward the door. That was still jammed. We ran toward the only thing left, the emergency hatch. We scrambled, clawing at the locks, forcing the panel open with shaking hands. The air behind us felt wrong, thick, unnatural, pressing against us like a living thing. Larkin yanked the hatch open. "Go!" I didn't hesitate. I dropped into the darkness, sliding down the emergency escape chute, my heart hammering against my ribs. The last thing I heard before I hit the ground below was Patel's voice, warped and wrong, echoing through the lab. "You shouldn't have looked."
I hit the ground hard, my knees slamming into cold concrete. Pain shot through my legs, but I barely noticed. The others dropped down behind me. Larkin, the techs, all of us scrambling to our feet, gasping for breath. Above us, the emergency hatch slammed shut on its own. We were in the sub-level now, a maintenance corridor beneath the main lab, dimly lit by flickering emergency lights. Dust clung to the air, and the hum of backup generators vibrated through the walls. Larkin didn't waste time. "We keep moving. Now." Nobody argued. We sprinted down the corridor, past rows of decommissioned servers and old equipment, the only sound our frantic footsteps. I kept glancing over my shoulder, half expecting to see Patel, or whatever was pretending to be Patel, crawling through the hatch after us. But the thing that had taken him didn't need doors. It had already found us before, and it wasn't going to stop now. We reached a reinforced blast door at the end of the corridor. Larkin punched in his override code, hands shaking. The keypad flashed red. Access denied. "Come on," Larkin muttered, trying again. Access denied. I turned, my breath catching in my throat. The emergency lights were dimming, one by one, down the length of the corridor. It was coming. Larkin cursed under his breath, pulling a manual release lever on the wall. The blast door hissed, groaning as it unlocked. We shoved through, sealing it behind us. We were in the facility's underground loading bay now, a wide, empty space filled with supply crates and emergency vehicles. A single freight elevator sat at the far end of the room, the only way back to the surface. We sprinted toward it. Behind us, the blast door bent inward, not from an explosion, from something pushing against it. Metal groaned, twisting like it was made of paper. A high-pitched whining filled the air, the sound of reality stretching. Larkin slammed the elevator button. "Come on, come on." The doors slid open. We shoved inside, jamming the controls for the surface level. The elevator shuddered, then began its slow, agonizing ascent. The last thing I saw before the doors closed. The blast door at the end of the bay finally gave in. It didn't break. It didn't explode. It simply peeled open like something had unfolded it from the inside. And beyond it, not darkness, something deeper, a void that moved. And then, the doors shut. The elevator lurched upward. Silence, except for our ragged breathing. Nobody spoke, nobody dared. The elevator kept climbing, floor by floor, Closer to the surface, closer to escape. Then the lights inside flickered, and a single word appeared on the elevator's display screen. Why? My stomach dropped. The power cut out completely. The elevator stopped, and somewhere, in the pitch-black darkness, something breathed.